Well, good morning, and welcome back to our pilgrimage through the summer. Today is day 25 at the Institute for Priestly Formation, and also Thursday of the 11th week of Ordinary Time. And again today, we have the two programs that have been here for the last 2 weeks. We have the seminary faculty members who do spiritual direction. They're learning more about how Well, good morning, and welcome back to our pilgrimage through the summer. Today is day 25 at the Institute for Priestly Formation and Thursday of the 11th week of Ordinary Time. On campus today are the two programs that have been here for the last 2 weeks. The seminar for seminary spiritual directors. The spiritual directors are continuing to zero in on just the importance of the directee, his spiritual experience, and how to help him name some of the movements of his heart in the spiritual direction conversation. The seminarians in the 10-week summer program, continuing their two classes in the afternoon class, will spend a little time this afternoon taking a look at the identity of the priest as a spiritual physician. I think a lot of us are hungry for our priests to be skilled in the ways of the spiritual life and to be spiritual physicians. So let's especially keep the seminarians in prayer today as they learn more about that essential identity. In the morning class, the seminarians will continue to zero in and rest in on the gift of celibacy, and we'll talk a little bit about just the temptations of the internet and all that accompanies that. I think there are many beautiful things that are on the internet, great resources and ways to find information, but I think we can fill in the gaps that internet pornography is certainly something that plagues many men and women, and certainly plagues the culture that the seminarians come from. And so seminarians themselves need to be sober and alert, as the scriptures say, about their temptations with the internet and internet pornography. And it's just really important that a seminarian and a priest know how to deal with temptation and when to deal with temptation. Temptations will change over the course of a seminarian and priest's life. Hopefully the temptations that he struggled with when he first went into the seminary are not the same temptations that he struggles with much later in life as a priest, but temptation will be there. It's a part of life. Whether it's internet pornography or whether it's any of the 7 deadly sins, temptation is going to be there in the life of a priest. It doesn't vanish on the day of his ordination. And so it's really important for him to know who to deal with temptation with, and that's to turn toward the Lord, but even more importantly, when, and that's immediately, right at the beginning, to bring the early movements of temptation to the Lord and to resist those in God's grace. And so if you were at IPF today, we had the same conversation with you about whatever your most predominant sin is, whatever the most frequent occasion of temptation is in your life. We would encourage you to learn from snowballs and avalanches and understanding how that connects with sin. If you're at the top of a mountain and you have snow all around you and you roll up a snowball and you send it down the mountain, it's a lot easier to deal with that movement of snow 10 feet after it starts than at the bottom of the mountain. Snowballs pick up steam. If you understand the analogy, the more that the snow has time to build momentum, the more dangerous it can become. What started out as a snowball at the top of the mountain can be an avalanche at the bottom. And if you and I try to deal with temptation at the bottom of the mountain, temptation can feel like an avalanche that just engulfs us and has its way with us. But if we deal with temptation at the very beginning, like a snowball at the top of the mountain, then it's much more manageable. We can see it and we know how to deal with it. There's a difference between dealing with a snowball at the top of the mountain and dealing with its force than dealing with an avalanche at the bottom of a mountain and dealing with its force. And the same is true with temptation. If you were at IPF today, we'd encourage you to trust the process, but to be honest with yourself and to have a long, loving look in the mirror and ask yourself, where is it that you are most susceptible to temptation? Where is it that you feel weakest or most vulnerable to the deceits and whispers of the enemy? And knowing that, knowing where you're most tempted, When do you deal with the temptation? Is it at the beginning, immediately, addressing it immediately? Or do you allow the temptation to tempt you, to lure you, to seduce you, to speak to you, and eventually then try to deal with it, knowing that when we do that, it just feels like it's a monster? If we're going to succeed, you might say, if we're going to grow in our spiritual life, it's important for us to know the difference between snowballs and avalanches, and the difference between dealing with temptation at the beginning versus dealing with temptation at the end. Now here's the good news. No matter when you deal with it, God's there with you. But if you ask, God will give you the grace to learn more about your own heart and when you're tempted and how you're tempted. God desires your holiness more than you do. He's longing to be in communion with you in all things, including the temptation. Sometimes there's a little whisper in our hearts that says that we're alone in dealing with temptation, and that, of course, is not the voice of God. So let's trust what is the voice of God, a voice of mercy and a voice of forgiveness. And let's ask today the Lord to show us, when are you most vulnerable and when do you deal with temptation? Let's trust that we're not dealing with it alone, that God's with us right there, that God desires us to turn to Him at the beginning of temptation. God bless you.